Okay, young friends. So now it's time to focus on the functional unit of each kidney, which is the nephron, also known as the renal corpuscle. Now, as far as the nephron is concerned, these are the functional units of each kidney. Each kidney, on an average, contains about 1 to 1.2 million nephrons. Yes, surprising but true. It contains about 1 to 1.2 million nephrons. Now, here you can see I have just again grossly marked the cortex and the medulla for you to understand the position of the various parts of the nephron. Now, the different parts of the nephron here are the renal corpuscle. This is the renal corpuscle, also called as the Malpighian body. And then you have the tubule, the proximal convoluted tubule, where my cursor is currently moving. Then you have the descending limb of the loop of Henle. Then it takes a hairpin bend and forms the ascending limb. And then again, it comes out to the cortex and gets convoluted to form the distal convoluted tubule that joins and opens into the common collecting duct. Now, these common collecting ducts then open at the renal papilla. The common collecting duct is also called as the duct of Bellini. I repeat, it is also called as the duct of Bellini. So I'm repeating the position of the different parts of the nephron. The Malpighian body, which is made up of two things, the Bowman's capsule and the glomerulus, the network of capillaries, lie within the cortex. The proximal and the distal convoluted tubules also lie within the cortex. The loop of Henle lies within the medulla. I repeat, the loop of Henle lies within the medulla, while the common collecting duct or the duct of Bellini passes from the cortex into the medulla to open at the apex of each pyramid and pours all its contents into the minor calyces. So here I have just labeled the different parts of the nephron, the Malpighian body, which lies in the cortex, the PCT, the DCT also lying in the cortex, the loop of Henle lying within the medulla. And of course, the common collecting duct also lying within the medulla. It passes actually from the cortex down into the medulla to open at the apex of each pyramid. So this is about the gross structure or the gross components of the nephron. So each nephron consists of two parts, the Malpighian body and the renal tubule. The renal tubule consists of the PCT, the DCT, the loop of Henle, and the collecting duct. As far as the PCT is concerned, the full form is proximal convoluted tubule. The expanded form of the DCT is the distal convoluted tubule. So what you see highlighted right now in green is the Bowman's capsule, which is the part of the Malpighian body. The Malpighian body consists of two things, the glomerulus, which I'm now highlighting, and the Malpighian body, and the Bowman's capsule. The Bowman's capsule is a cup-shaped structure with a concavity in which the network of capillaries called as the glomerulus lie lodged within it. Now, this glomerulus is formed by the division of the afferent arterioles. Afferent are the blood vessels that carry blood towards the glomerulus, while efferent arterioles are the ones that carry blood away from the glomerulus. Now remember, glomerulus are a network of blood capillaries that are lodged within the concavity or the depression of the Bowman's capsule. The Bowman's capsule, I repeat, is the cup-shaped structure. Now, as far as the afferent and the efferent arterioles are concerned, the diameter of the afferent arteriole is much wider as compared to the efferent. I repeat, the diameter of the afferent arteriole is much wider than the efferent. The reason for this is that it allows the blood to enter in very fast into the glomerulus, but because of the narrow diameter of the efferent arteriole, it exits very slowly from the glomerulus. The blood enters the glomerulus very quickly because of the wider diameter of the afferent arteriole, but the exit of the blood from the glomerulus is slow due to the narrowness of the efferent arterioles as compared to the afferent. So this results in a build-up of a hydrostatic pressure within the glomerulus, which is responsible for ultrafiltration. Ultrafiltration is the first step of urine formation, which occurs within the Malpighian body. And the pressure that is required for the filtration process is due to the difference in the diameters of the afferent and the efferent arterioles. As the blood flows through the glomerulus, the most of the liquid part of the blood, except the blood proteins, the plasma proteins that is, and the blood corpuscles, rest everything gets filtered out. So the blood entering the glomerulus has a larger volume, but the blood that leaves the glomerulus has a reduced volume, and it is also much thicker because most of the liquid part of the blood is filtered out and it collects within the space between the two walls of the Bowman's capsule. You can see here there are two white lines that are marking the walls of the Bowman's capsule, the inner wall and the outer wall. The space in between is called as the urinary space, where the primary urine or the first filtrate that is formed after ultrafiltration will collect. Now, this filtrate will now enter the renal tubule, first passing through the proximal convoluted tubule. So this proximal convoluted tubule is lined by cuboidal epithelium provided with microvilli to increase the surface area for reabsorption. Because the filtrate that is flowing through the PCT contains a lot of useful substances like water, glucose, amino acids, vitamins, etc. So these are to be reabsorbed, the ions, sodium, chloride, etc. So the majority of the reabsorption takes place from the PCT. In fact, in healthy individuals, 100% glucose is reabsorbed back into the blood, and that reabsorbed contents are taken up by the blood that is flowing through these peritubular capillaries, which are formed by the splitting of the efferent arterioles. So this is the efferent arteriole, which splits further to form the network of capillaries that surround the PCT and the DCT, called as the peritubular capillaries. So whatever contents are reabsorbed, they are poured back into the peritubular capillaries. So 100% glucose in a healthy individual. Now, why am I stressing on an healthy individual? The reason is in people suffering from diabetes mellitus, where the blood sugar levels are above normal or higher than the normal, then excess blood sugar cannot be reabsorbed by the kidneys. Kidneys have a threshold value, a maximum limit up to which they can reabsorb glucose, and that value is about 180 milligrams per 100 ml of blood. So if the blood glucose concentration is higher than 180 milligrams per 100 ml, then that excess glucose will not be reabsorbed. It will be excreted out via the urine. So presence of glucose in urine is an abnormal condition, which is called as glucosuria or glycosuria. So glucosuria or glycosuria is the presence of glucose in urine, which is an abnormal condition. Coming back to the process of urine formation. So as the filtrate passes through the PCT, nearly 75% of the water is reabsorbed back into the peritubular capillaries from the PCT itself, along with a lot of nutrients and ions. Now, as that filtrate enters the descending limb of the loop of Henle, you can see here the descending limb is initially thick, and as we move down, it becomes thinner. Now, this descending limb of the loop of Henle is permeable to water, but not to ions. So only water is reabsorbed. So as the filtrate passes down, the water gets reabsorbed, and therefore the filtrate becomes more and more hypertonic or concentrated. It is because it is losing water. So as water is lost from a solution, the solution will become more and more concentrated, or in other words, it becomes hypertonic. You can see here there is a second network of capillaries that go on to surround the loop of Henle, which is called as the vasa recta. Okay, these capillary networks that surrounds the loop of Henle is called as the vasa recta. Now, the loop of Henle makes a hairpin bend. The filtrate is maximally concentrated here in the loop of Henle in the hairpin bend. And then you have the filtrate entering the ascending limb, which is initially thin, and then it gradually becomes thicker as it moves out of the medulla. Now, the ascending limb is permeable to ions like sodium and chloride, but not to water. So therefore, your solutes are getting reabsorbed back, and therefore the filtrate gradually becomes hypotonic or slightly dilute. As that filtrate passes out, now the tubule again becomes convoluted, and this is called as the DCT, the distal convoluted tubule. The distal convoluted tubule is the site for reabsorption of about 15% water, but the reabsorption of water from the DCT is under the influence of a hormone from the pituitary gland called the antidiuretic hormone, abbreviated as ADH, also known as the vasopressin. So this vasopressin or the ADH can sense scarcity of water in the body fluids and stimulate reabsorption of more water from the DCT. In fact, when the filtrate reaches the common collecting duct, then also the ADH in this region can help in retention or reabsorption of about 4% of water. So about 75% water is reabsorbed in the PCT, another 5% in the descending limb of the loop of Henle, about 15% from the DCT, and about 4% from the collecting duct. So overall, about 99% of water gets reabsorbed along with useful substances like glucose, amino acids, ions, etc. So because only selected substances are reabsorbed, this second step of urine formation is more appropriately referred to as the selective reabsorption. It is called as the selective reabsorption. Now coming to the final step of urine formation, which is tubular secretion. Actually a misnomer, because the tubule does not secrete any substance or any waste, but there are certain substances that escape out filtration in the first step. During ultrafiltration, they do not get filtered out. Then these substances are circulating in the peritubular capillaries. So these substances are directly released from the peritubular capillaries into the DCT. These substances include something like hydrogen ions, then pigments, drugs, toxins, etc., which may have escaped out filtration. So after the three steps, that is ultrafiltration, selective reabsorption, and tubular secretion, when the filtrate for the first time reaches the collecting duct, that is when we call it as urine. Until then, we refer it to as the filtrate. And now when it is in the collecting duct, where most of the contents present in the filtrate are to be eliminated, that is when we call it as the urine. So this is the common collecting duct or the papillary duct, which opens at the apex of each pyramid. That is also called as the renal papilla. From the renal papilla, these contents will move down into the minor calyces, from the minor calyces into the major calyces, then to the pelvis, and then the ureters will carry the urine via peristalsis up to the urinary bladder for temporary storage. So this, in short, in brief, is about the process of urine formation. Now, I mentioned to you all about one abnormal condition of urine, that is glycosuria. There is another condition where presence of blood, which is actually an abnormality. So presence of blood in urine is called hematuria, and presence of proteins in urine is called albuminuria. So presence of any of these contents, whether blood, glucose, or proteins, can be an indicator of either diabetes mellitus, if it is presence of sugar in urine, or presence of blood or presence of proteins can be an indicator of the kidney malfunctioning. Okay, so this is about the overview of the excretory system. Very soon I'll be coming up with the videos of other chapters as well. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.